Hey guys, welcome to BP, the Bible Perspective. I want to deconstruct a video that was aired on PragerU. Here's the caption. Dad eloquently dismantles CRT in school board speech. Now, two things bothered me about this video. One, his misrepresentation of CRT or critical race theory, and the incredibly astounding statements he said about racism. Now, before we get into it, please like and share this video and subscribe to BP, the Bible Perspective. And as always, if you have a thought, a comment, add it to the comment section below. All comments are welcome. Now, I want to set this up. PragerU is an extreme conservative platform that gets millions of views, that caters to mostly white conservatives and white evangelicals. The problem when this argument about critical race theories is that they've made it the boogeyman. And understand that while we're not going to discuss or get into defining critical race theory, they can't, but obviously this wasn't the format. The video is a school board meeting where they argued about critical race theory and then talked about banning it. They were going to vote on banning critical race theory being taught in elementary schools. Now here's what we need to know. It's a silly resolution because critical race theory is not taught in elementary schools. Critical race theory is a third and fourth year law academic. That's basically what it is. And that's as far as I want to go with it. In some respects, even if they ban critical race theory, what have they banned since critical race theory is not being taught in school? But the idea is that they are stirred up. They're stirred to anger. And who is it that is stirred to anger? Now, look at these pictures here. These are school board meetings that have erupted over critical race theory. Now you will note that predominantly these are white school boards, school parents, communities, that they are riled up over what? Critical race theory. And by critical race theory, it's the race that's in the critical theory. And by race, we mean the black race. So I want to play the video and then I'm going to come back and dissect it. Here we go.
I begin my comments tonight by reading a quote, which in essence is the genesis of all of this Black Lives Matter, social justice, CRT conversations we're having in our country today. Quote, "I am not going to stand up to show pride in a flag for a country that oppresses black people and people of color," close quote. Colin Kaepernick, August 2016. I am the direct descendant of the North American slave trade. Both my parents are black, all 4 of my grandparents are black, all 8 of my great-great-grandparents, all 16 of my great-greats. On my mother's side, my ancestors were enslaved in Alabama. On my father's side, we were enslaved in Texas. I am not oppressed. I'm not oppressed, and I'm not a victim. I'm neither oppressed nor a victim. I travel all across this country of ours. And I check into hotels, and I fly commercially, and I walk into retail establishments, and I order food in restaurants. I go wherever I want, whenever I want. I am treated with kindness, dignity, and respect, literally from coast to coast. I have 3 children. They are not oppressed either, although they are victims. I've taught my children they are victims of 3 things: their own ignorance, their own laziness, and their own poor decision making. That is all. My children, we are not victims of America. We are not victims of some unseen 190-year-old force that kind of floats around in the ether. Putting critical race theory into our classrooms is taking our nation in the wrong direction. Racism in America would by and large be dead today if it were not for certain people and institutions keeping it on life support. And sadly, very sadly, one of those institutions is the American education system. I can think of nothing more damaging to a society than to tell a baby born today that she has grievances against another baby born today simply because of what their ancestors may have done 2 centuries ago. There is simply no point in doing that to our children. And putting critical race theory into our classrooms in part does that. Putting critical race theory into our classrooms is not combating racism, it's fanning the flames of what little embers are left. I encourage you to support this resolution. Let racism die the death it deserves, and let's keep living the life of the country that we want. Thank you.
Okay, so certainly a lot to unpack there. So let me make a couple of statements and then I want to get back into the video and dissect it. The problem with this presentation by a black man is to totally disregard the lived experiences and realities of racism that's present. Worse, he makes the struggle, the fight for justice, the fight against racism, a worse evil than the racism itself. And I'll get to his statement later. So let's get back into this video and now deconstruct what he said, because boy, there's a lot to it. Here we go.
I begin my comments tonight by reading a quote, which in essence is the genesis of all of this Black Lives Matter, social justice, CRT conversations we're having in our country today. Quote, "I am not going to stand up to show pride in a flag for a country that oppresses black people and people of color," close quote. Colin Kaepernick, August 2016.
Okay, so the very first thing that's wrong is he blames conversations on and about Black Lives Matter, social justice, racism, on Colin Kaepernick kneeling. And what he doesn't say is why Colin Kaepernick knelt. See, that's the problem there. Well, what did Colin say he was kneeling for? And is that evil? And is that wrong? Look at this man here. This is Jackie Robinson, the first Negro ball player in the major leagues. Now, while many people celebrate him, this is what he said over a half a century before Colin Kaepernick kneeled and refused to sing the anthem. This is what Jackie Robinson said. "I cannot stand and sing the anthem. I cannot salute the flag. I know that I am a black man in a white man's world." See, the problem or the issues of racism didn't start with Colin Kaepernick. The conversations never stopped. The issues have never been solved. All right, so let's go back to our video here.
I am the direct descendant of the North American slave trade. Both my parents are black, all 4 of my grandparents are black, all 8 of my great-great-grandparents, all 16 of my great-greats. On my mother's side, my ancestors were enslaved in Alabama. On my father's side, we were enslaved in Texas. I am not oppressed.
Okay, I'm not sure why he said that, okay, that he invokes his ancestors who were slaves and then says, I'm not oppressed. Well, does he mean that he's not a slave? You see? And does it and if he says he's not oppressed, fine. Does it mean others are not oppressed? All right, let's continue.
I'm not oppressed, and I'm not a victim. I'm neither oppressed nor a victim. I travel all across this country of ours, and I check into hotels, and I fly commercially, and I walk into retail establishments, and I order food in restaurants. I go wherever I want, whenever I want. I am treated with kindness, dignity, and respect, literally from coast to coast.
Okay, so again, the fallacy of this is, does his experience reflect everyone's experience? Now, I want you again to pay attention to the audience behind him. I want you to notice their color. These are the ones, they're standing up, they're giving him the amen. But I want you to pay attention to these two gentlemen here. Now remember what the guy in the video said. He travels all around the world. He's treated well. He's never abused. He hasn't experienced racism. Well, these are two black conservatives as well. The one on the right, Alan West, is more popular. I'll get to him in a moment. He's more popular. But the one on the left here, his name is Mac Miller, and he's at this event that you see right here. Something happens to him. Now remember, he talks the same Republican talk, conservative talking points, no racism, right? No problems. But I want you to see, I saw this, I'm pulling this video from this other YouTube creator that he posted here. So you're going to see his picture. But I want you to see what happens to him immediately after this picture, this is the still photo actually of a video. I want you to notice what happens to him.
Don't hurt him. Don't hurt him. Don't hurt him. Don't hurt him. You all right? Hey, that's your lieutenant governor. What are you doing? What are you doing? What are you doing?
Now, what's kind of funny about this is they keep referring to him as lieutenant governor. He's actually running for lieutenant governor. And they're amazed at why would you treat this man this way, right? Wow, what happened? Now, Alan West, as I said, he is probably more popular than the other. He was the chairman of the Texas GOP, and he's also running for governor of Texas. But something happened to him. This is his wife, and she was arrested on DUI. And Alan was livid because, according to Alan, his wife wasn't drunk, she wasn't drinking, and she was treated horribly. Now, this is an interview that he did after his wife horrendous arrest. He had to spend the night in jail. He couldn't even talk with her. It wasn't until the next day, I think almost midday, that she was even bonded out. And in this video, he even further goes on to even talk about defunding certain programs in the police and certain systematic things going on. This deserves its own video, which I will do. But these are black conservatives who say the same thing as this guy here until it happens. No racism. Why was he treated why was his wife, why didn't they recognize the name Alan West, So It's just kind of funny how these things never happen until they do. So when this guy says, we're going to go back to our friend in the video here, when he says that I travel the country, nothing ever happened to me. Well, yeah, and until it happens. All right, let's go back to our video.
My children.
Oh, one other thing I wanted to say about his statement when he says here that I'm not oppressed, I travel the country, I'm treated well. It could be two things. Either he's just not aware of the racism directed toward him, or he is aware of it, but he just chooses not to confront it. Just a thought. Let's go on.
We are not victims of America. We are not victims of some unseen 190-year-old force that kind of floats around in the ether.
Now, he's talking about slavery. First of all, it wasn't 190 years ago. Slavery ended in 1865. And when they tried to make statements like this, they're trying to say that it was ancient history. I can tell you my grandmother was born in 1900. So she was just 2 generations away from, depending on how you want to count a generation, she's either a generation or 2 generations away from slavery. In other words, but that's not even the issue, because they don't even talk about the 100 years of Jim Crow that ended in 1965. I mean, and the other forms of racism that have persisted even to the present day. All right, let's continue.
Putting critical race theory into our classrooms is taking our nation in the wrong direction. Racism in America would by and large be dead today if it were not for certain people and institutions keeping it on life support. And sadly...
Okay, so much wrong here, so much wrong, so much wrong. The first thing is, when he says racism would be dead had it not been for critical race theory being taught. That's just stupid. The people behind him could be the people that's keeping racism. And this idea that racism would be dead, wait a minute, are you telling me that all of those people there, that all of those people there are being stirred to racism because someone else, because of critical race theory? If they're not racist, why would critical race theory cause something that's not in them to flourish? See, it doesn't make sense. Racism is real because it is in the very DNA of our country. How else could you enslave people? How could a nation that claims to be God-fearing, how could a nation that claims to be freedom for all enslave a certain color of people? Well, they were conditioned. And that conditioning has never been, we never got over that. So when he says that, racism would die unless people would stop talking about it. No, if you stop talking about it, the reason why Kaepernick kneeled is because we have a racism problem. Get this. 3 years after Kaepernick, you had George Floyd murder. That's the problem. 3 years after. Didn't stop then, did it? All right, let's continue on.
Sadly, very sadly, one of those institutions is the American education system. I can think of nothing more damaging to a society than to tell a baby born today that she has grievances against another baby born today simply because of what their ancestors may have done 2 centuries ago. There is simply no point in doing that to our children.
Okay, what is saddening about this statement here? This is what he said. He says, there's nothing more damaging, he said. Now, that's the statement there. There's nothing more damaging than telling kids that grievances, in other words, even if it was false grievance, in other words, basically, this is what he's saying. To say that, and this is the kind of what's hidden here is the reparation issue, right? That let's talk about systemic racism. Let's talk about what is going on in the present. That's what he's referring to. And so the pushback is, well, why should I have to pay for reparations for slavery for my ancestors? So do you admit that your ancestors were racist, evil slave people? Then if you admit that, and it's true, then you have to say, was justice ever done? See? And as Christians, does God ignore justice? Does God say sweep it under? See, a lot of people will even go so far as to say, well, you know what? Hey, guess what? My ancestors came in on the boat. They didn't participate in slavery. They never owned slaves. But they did come to a segregated nation. And they benefited from a segregated nation that black people, the very black citizens, were deprived of. And the idea that this false argument that people are saying, like for example, look at the people in the crowd there, that people are saying to those people, we want your money to pay reparations. No, the country is the one who owes reparations. The country needs to make right the evils that were done. That's the issue there. And so to try to put this off, and what's even worse is to say that that's more damaging. Is that more damaging than what racism actually did? Than the people who rode around in sheets, hanging people and burning homes and murdering people? Or how about the conditioning, the horrid conditions of slavery itself? You mean to tell me that teaching CRT, that's worse? Even if what he says was true, that still wouldn't be worse than the horrors and the evils that were perpetrated by this nation through people of this nation. Let's continue.
Putting critical race theory into our classrooms in part does that. Putting critical race theory into our classrooms is not combating racism, it's fanning the flames of what little embers are left.
How is teaching critical race theory fanning the flames of racism? See, what you're talking about, it would have to take two to tango. So if teaching critical race theory is the evil, then you mean to tell me that it's turning the good, God-fearing white folks back to racists? Or turning them to be racist? That's just nonsense. And again, since we're not getting into the whole detail of what critical race theory is, he's just flat wrong. He's just flat wrong. Let's continue.
Encourage you to support this resolution. Let racism die the death it deserves, and let's keep living the life of the country that we are.
All right, so how does racism die? And it's certainly not by teaching critical race theory. And again, let me remind you that critical race theory is not being taught in schools, okay? Critical race theory is not being taught in schools. Now I want to go back to one statement that he said here. Let's replay it, and then there's something I want to bring out in here.
around in the ether. Putting critical race theory into our classrooms is taking our nation in the wrong direction. Racism in America would by...
Okay, that's not what I wanted to play. I wanted to go back and let me see if I can find it here. Let's see, because this is something I wanted to certainly bring out. Okay, let's take a look at this. Listen to this.
Oh, my children, we are not victims of America. We are not victims of some unseen 190-year-old force that kind of floats around in the ether. Putting critical race theory into our classrooms is taking our nation...
All right, I want to go back just a little further because he said something about his children that I wanted to address. Something about his children. Okay, here we go.
Literally from coast to coast. I have 3 children. They are not oppressed either, although they are victims. I've taught my children they are victims of 3 things: their own ignorance, their own laziness, and their own poor decision making. That is all.
All right, so this is what I wanted to address about his children right here. He says they're not victims, okay? His children are not victims. So when they go out into the world, according to him, they're not going to face racism? They're not going to be confronted? This picture here, this was captured last week. This is a college campus. The white girl you see there, and the pictures you see that she is showing is of African American, the inferiority, the ugliness of how African Americans are. In other words, she's going to say, this is what ugliness is, versus this is, and then she shows white people. Let me read her statement. He says, the female student, Taylor Marie, put on the presentation in the dining hall and mentioned characteristics such as big nostrils, dreads, and big lips as ugly. She used photographs of black students on the football team to detail her argument, and also used photos of white students over the years as comparisons for attractiveness. Where did she get that information from? Where did she get that learning from? This is a young student. He said, remember our guy said, let's let racism die. Oh, wait a minute. How does it die with her? Those pictures of the football team that she's showcasing, she's saying they're ugly and white students are better. He says his kids are not victims. Well, wait a minute. These kinds of incidents are happening all over campuses. This is why we're able, in the age that we're living in with cell phones and videos, we're seeing these. See, the problem with that statement, that video, is the denial of racism. And truthfully, I don't think he's denying it as much as he's just playing the game to fit in his community, to fit in his job, to fit in his political platform. And that's even worse. All right, guys, look, that is my perspective. I would love to hear your thoughts on this. Add them to the comments section below, and don't forget to like and share this video and subscribe to BP, the Bible Perspective. Look, till next time, I will see you then.